Welcome back to the Ordinary Legends podcast. I'm Josiah Brondike. I'm one of your hosts here today, and I'm joined by my fellow frequent guest on the podcast.
It's me. I'm Zach.
It is you. You are Zach.
And I'm pushing buttons today. We're going to see how that goes.
Which is crazy. And now, in that beautiful third shot, you also see our new guest, never been on the podcast before. Who are you and what do you sound like?
My name is Joseph Patano. That's me.
I always say Patano. I'm so glad we had this conversation.
It works. It works.
You've been angry this whole time we've been friends. And we waited for this public moment to tell me, hey, Zach, Joe, I have a question for you this morning.
Yeah.
Do you have more grace than a chair?
I know why you're asking.
But do you have an answer?
That is a question that got a man we're here to talk about today in a whole lot of trouble. It was asked, it was answered, and it got him kicked out of a school.
I know. It was like the greatest diss track ever, I think, personally.
Yeah, and I don't know if I have more grace than Chauncey Whittlesley, but we'll see.
Can I say, of what I know of you,
Yeah.
I would say you do have more grace than a chair.
But do you know Chauncey Whittlesley?
I don't. I'm not speaking of him, but if you can work in that compliment into your conversation this week, more power to you. So the
I
gentleman
think
we're
I got
talking
his
about
name right.
today, orphaned at 14, expelled from Yale at 23, coughing blood in the wilderness at 25, and dead at 29. Yet his life was useful. It sparked revival. The world over, his journals have made an impact. They made an impact on you.
Yeah.
And as of 7 a.m. this morning, I didn't know anything about this guy. So, Joseph, you're here as our expert. Who are we talking about today?
David Brainerd was a missionary to the American Indians. And so we're going to talk a little bit about his generation, his day, I hope, and help people kind of see him where he was. And then we could talk about things that he said or wrote or did, maybe some takeaways, things like that on the man's life. Such a young man, and his impact has been, nobody knows the impact of this short life, as you've said, of David Brainerd. And yes, he impacted me directly, which I'd love to testify to decades ago in my own life.
All right.
Yeah.
So what's the story? Give us our bearings, and let's dive right in.
Okay.
When are we talking?
He was born in 1718.
Okay.
So this is, I wrote some notes here to help people kind of try to jump into this day. This is before America declared its independence, which is 1776. He would be dead for nearly 30 years before the Declaration of Independence is even written in the U.S.
But he's hanging out here. We're in the Americas.
He's born in Connecticut.
Okay.
So he was born in Connecticut. He died in Massachusetts, is buried there. I've got the quote of his tomb, which I hope to read later as an interesting witness to the man's life. But yeah, this is America. There's no light bulbs. There's no industrial revolution. There's no civil war. That would not happen till the 19th century. Right. So just trying to see Brainerd in the way that when we think of history, how far back do you go to a guy like that? How different was the world even 100 years ago, let alone
there were no cameras. So we've got a few pictures here to show what he looked like, but that's a painting, I guess.
Look
right?
at the jawline.
So and you said he passed away at 29?
Yep.
So, I mean, I know there was a lot more testosterone in people back then. So that could be like a 12-year-old.
They didn't eat Chick-fil-A. There was no Chick-fil-A in his diet.
Don't blame the Lord's chicken for our current T levels.
There's estrogen.
I reject that.
So Brainerd was a interesting man. There's a painting. There's many. We have drawings.
Yeah, we got a few drawings or paintings,
you didn't have the invention of the first commercially successful gas engine until 1860.
Yeah, they ride horses.
This guy died in 1747. Yeah. And rode 3,000 plus miles, they estimate, on horseback as a missionary. And we just got to try to get a sense of this guy, which I think is why the impact is so real. In a hut with a candle and a quill, he wrote so much. And he was kind of required to as a missionary. So we have his journal, which he kept for 7 years of his life. And so we have this chronicle of the man, and that's why we're here talking about him today. You wouldn't have known without this published work. But this is a long time ago, and it's just really interesting to think. The Ford Model T, you know what that is? Do you know what the Ford Model T?
I'm from Michigan. So
what's the Model T?
So Henry Ford, that's like the first car that was on the market that was cheap.
You could have it in any color as long as you wanted black.
Yeah, that is the best. The best color was available.
Right.
And so it kind of revolutionized the way we did life in America. Not in his day and age. I'm not
1908, that thing came out. So, again, he died in 1747. Yeah. So I'm just trying to gear the time.
Early America. And, if, some people might know Hamilton or whatever, not most accurate historic depiction necessarily.
In what ways?
I mean,
what are you talking
just
about?
In some ways. And so we're pre that. So we're in early America. Connecticut before it was cool. David Brainerd's born.
Is Connecticut cool?
I've heard Connecticut has the best pizza.
Okay, what's like Delaware?
Is that where
then
the guy
Connecticut
with the
or
Haven
something?
and the one bite challenge?
Portnoy.
I don't think it's Portnoy.
Yeah, it's Portnoy.
That's Fortnite. That's
Dave
the one with the
Portnoy,
pew pews.
Says Connecticut has the best pizza.
Because it's not west of the Mississippi.
Haven.
The bread is not
guess.
alkaline.
There's something about the water. Now, take us to 17, and tell us a little bit about his family life, kind of how does the story get started.
Amen. And so, again, trying to picture David Brainerd, the man. You're talking about a guy that dies at 29. I mean, we live a lot longer than people often did, and you go back in history, not as long as some of those in biblical history, obviously. You go all the way back. But 29 years old, what were you doing? What was I doing at 29? There's a lot of testimonies of guys that are getting MDivs that are, in pastoral ministry in Europe and other places. Just a different day. He's born in Connecticut, like we said, 1718. He's the sixth child of 8 kids. His father dies. Yeah, big family. His father dies when he's 9. His mother when he's 14.
So orphaned at 14.
Yeah, he moves in with a sister that is slightly older than him at that time. And he is wrestling with his faith, the kind of thing we all do. Puritanism in the day, another part of understanding Brainerd's story really is required to understand. Puritanism is that which, comes to the colonies, English settlers, Anglican history, Church of England, things like that. It had devolved in some legalistic ways that its ancestors would have said, repent. This is not what we're about. And so there's sort of a...
Kind of a strict, cold, harsh
very much
Christianity?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it had gotten into universities like Yale, which he is kicked out of, where Yale and the Great Awakening, something we need to mention, had swept through... George Whitefield, preacher, 1730s, 1740s. Brainerd is caught up in this. And so the Puritanism of his day mixed with what they feared was an excessive, hyper-spiritual...
Kind of like, sit down, young bucks, you're getting too excited. That was a little bit the culture of the Great Awakening, that there's fire, revival, fervor coming at, but the more established church, including... Now, you said Yale, not normally where we think of today as the main missionary training hub, but in this time, it was that. It was a pretty prominent school for training ministers, correct?
Yeah, well, there were several. Yale, you had Harvard, you had Princeton was founded later, and all of these schools were seen as, in fact, the laws were passed that if you weren't licensed by one of them, you weren't preaching in New England.
Oh, okay.
And so when he got kicked out of Yale, there went whatever hopes he had for a pastoral ministry.
So kid orphaned at 14 still finds faith in this kind of strict Christianity and says, hey, this is what I want to give my life to. Yeah. And he goes, I'll call what happened at seminary that got him kicked out?
Well, he is converted, he says, in July of 1739. He has comes to faith. He describes it in his writings as God breaking in, if I was going to summarize it. He's chronicling, he's journaling at this time and writes of it. So again, we have it. Actually, I wrote down the date here on 12 July, 1739. It seems to be the time where he says, I trust.
So how oldish is he?
He would have been somewhere 21.
Okay.
Yeah, 21 years old. He's 8 years as a missionary and only 3 or 4, or 8 years as a believer, 3 or 4 on the mission field. That's it.
Wow.
So such a short life. In fact, 10,765 days by my math is how long this guy lived. And we've been alive, all 3 of us already, double that. Me, probably like triple, because I'm super old.
Impossible to believe.
Some of our students listening to this have been alive half of that.
Yeah.
So like for them to imagine for a second that their life is already
half over.
29.
It's not the way that they would naturally be thinking of it, but that guy didn't get more than 29.
But a lasting impact, certainly.
And that's, so he's, my next note here that you asked the question on, kicked out of Yale. So again, 1730s, 40s, you had the first Great Awakening.
Sure.
Sweeps through America. There's revivalism, there's preaching. People are repenting. They are finding faith, and they are seeking answers. And there's just this fervor that blows across New England. Brainerd is a listener. He's, again, in that period, he's coming to faith himself. And the faculty at Yale Seminary, I don't want to go into all that. I don't know so much about it, to speak on like quotations of them. Sure. But it seemed they opposed a lot of what was being preached. They actually brought in Jonathan Edwards, and I'm going to go ahead and plug this book now, as there's a time as good as any. And one of my takeaways today for our viewers will be spend time in this book. Get this book, read this book.
It's The Life and Diary of David Brainerd.
Yes, this book, to my knowledge, when this one was published, it was said has never been out of print since the 18th century.
Okay, kind of a flex.
It's still going out there. there. It's one of the most widely distributed books in the English-speaking language. It is his diary and was composed by Jonathan Edwards.
Journal. Much more manly.
Much more manly.
Yeah.
It was not
like a diary is pink and there's glitter pens that you're using.
I suggested to our middle school boys that they would maybe record something in a diary. There was rioting in the streets. They're like, absolutely not.
I read a note from one of my daughters said I don't give her enough personal space. I don't know. That's what her diary said. And I just
journal.
No,
it was a joke.
But he journaled, and he was required to as a missionary for those who sent him to send that correspondence and let us know how you're doing.
It's like an accountability tool, kind of like what's going on out there.
It was required of missionaries, and so he did it as a personal pursuit, but also a little bit required. And in this book, he is caught up in faith in his life in this great awakening time. The faculty of Yale brought in the illustrious Jonathan Edwards, who is one of the greatest theologians America has ever produced.
We'll talk about him someday, for sure.
Yes, and he is brought in to sort of address the emotional, the spiritual life and what's going on. He preaches a sermon called The Distinctive Marks of a Move of the Spirit of God. I think I got that title right. Yeah. And Yale, the folks, is kind of a backfire. They wanted Edwards to come in and just calm everybody down, and it did the opposite.
A little bit of gasoline.
So the question you began with, do you have more grace than a chair, was a speech delivered at Yale from a certain member of the faculty. And when asked, young Brainerd, in his now born-again, seminary-pursuing pastoral trail he thought he was on, what did you think of that prayer that old guy did there? And his answer was, I think he has no more grace than a chair. He was expelled because they were censoring, fining students in many ways in those days.
Yeah. Powers that be heard that comment, didn't super appreciate it. And so at that moment, it'd be easy to be like crushed, defeated. Hey, the dream's over.
It's
don't
over.
Get to be a pastor. Don't get to be a missionary.
Again, you couldn't
my
pastor.
Sanction.
Yeah.
So, but we're still talking about a missionary. So how did he get from there to where we remember him for?
He had met Edwards prior to his death, and we'll talk about this. He died in Jonathan Edwards' home, spent about the last 5 months of his life there, dying horribly, and died. He had met Edwards. Well, another guy that was familiar with Brainerd knew of his fervor, and again, he labored to get back into Yale. He apologized. He rode horseback. Again, this is Connecticut, where he's from. All of his missionary works are within a few hundred miles of where he was born. He was offered pastorates down on Long Island in the most luxurious and best parish in known world at the time, and he said no. And this was into his missionary journeys. This is a few years later.
Sure. And a parish is like the house or the pastoral house that they have. Or you're talking about the parsonage or the parish? Like the
parish where he's supposed to minister is on Long Island, New York. That's just across the Long Island Sound of maybe, if I had to guess, say about 50 miles from where he was born.
It's a cush job.
It's the cush job.
Right.
Edward said it is the most affluent, meaning wealthy, nicest parish I'm aware of. And he was offered a pastorate there. Again, this was the work of, we would say, of God maybe opening the door. He said no.
So people could see that the Spirit of God was at work in his life. They were interested in that and being part of it.
Said, go be a missionary.
But
you should be a missionary.
So to where? Like, what was his call? He said no to Long Island, kind of where the money
that was later.
Was.
Yeah.
But where did God call him to be serving?
He served in the Forks of the Delaware, in Pennsylvania. I wrote down to, as best I could tell, it was 3 different separate Indian colonies where he's at: New Jersey, again, Pennsylvania, and Delaware. And God in New Jersey really pours out for him. We need to talk about this, as is mentioned in this book by Mr. Danny Aiken, that I've also read the section on Brainerd here, which is called 10 Who Changed the World. Nice. He talks about this blessing in Brainerd's ministry, too, toward the end. It's very sweet. It's kind of the thing that you would hope to see with every missionary, and maybe you don't. But in New Jersey, God really gave Brainerd a return on his labor, an amazing blessing that he writes about, and I'll read a quote of it here later.
So kind of in the settler context, the Native Americans, kind of where was his target demographic that he was ministering to?
Yeah, and it's important to remember that missionaries, like we all know if you're going on a foreign mission field, it's more than just preaching. Right. He's doing translation work. He's doing land cultivation projects, building projects. Sure. He's working with people to try to reach the Native Americans. Again, 3 different tribes. I'll read it on his tombstone. They write the tribes that he is a minister to primarily. Yeah. And it was part of his Presbyterian church's parish. Again, an area of ministry over which they have oversight that they sent him to. And it's 3 tribes of these Native Americans.
So basically, wander out there into the forest, random kid from Connecticut, find these people, tell them about Jesus.
Yeah.
Was there an established work in these tribes already, or was it more of a pioneer thing that he was doing?
I'd say everything in those days is pioneer.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And 1700s, that's fair.
And it's an important thing to remember, like the massive population growth at the time. We're talking millions of settlers coming to the U.S. in these days, prior to the Revolutionary War, prior to, again, all of that. This started, 1692? We got the Columbus thing. Yeah. You go forward now into this man's life. He's born 1718. It's a different time. Everything's pioneer. Everything's being built in New England. He built 4 huts in his life with his own hand that he lived in his missionary travels. Yeah, 4 little huts.
I read, talking about the pioneer work that he did, I read at some point that he was preaching in one community to one group of indigenous people without a translator for like 2 to 3 years, and is trying to do his best. But again, I didn't read quite as much as you did, but I can only imagine, like,
an uphill battle.
Like, am I making a difference right now? Am I even making a dent?
Oh, you read his journals, and that is a question. There are over 20 times you'll read he wished for death.
Wow. So yeah, like in his short time on the mission field, you're like, how did it go? What was the fruit? Did anybody respond? Were there any established churches? Kind of what happened when he poured his life out there?
And I'm so grateful just that Zach mentioned the translation piece, because there's a guy that really gets to know. You read the bios. I've read several and listened to sermons on Brainerd and biography messages on him. He never gets mentioned, and so I'm going to mention him. He's his translator, Moses Tinda Tatami.
Let's go, Moses.
That guy was Brainerd's primary translator.
Was a believer?
With him. Yeah. Well, actually, I don't know. Okay. I don't know. I would think he was, but he is listed as the primary translator of the man.
Part of this work.
So I'm just going to do a plug for Moses, because nobody hears about Moses.
Wherever you are right now, give a round of applause to Moses.
Let's thank God for Moses. There was response, but I think what influences so many people about the life of David Brainerd, and if we don't talk about this, we can't even touch why he was so influential.
Sure.
Is that there was so little fruit you would look at and go, man, I kept that guy going. What kept him going was not the fruit of conversions, and you preach to a group of these are Indians. These are he'll write about how 9 months prior to some of the sweetest time in his life in New Jersey, they're worshiping satanic idols and drunk and totally uninterested in what he's talking about. And now they're worshiping Jesus. There was a time of sweetness. There was some fruit that he saw. But by and large, he is suffering. He is alone. He is praying to God for a brother who would come along and let him just share his burden with. And think about that. He's got nobody.
Yeah.
He's out in a hut.
Yeah.
And this Moses guy, again, I mention him because he never gets he never gets a mention.
Right.
I don't know about his disposition. I doubt he was a solid believer, actually, because Brainerd yearns for one. Often in his writings, like, I so wish I had a brother to just partner with and love with and be in this missionary work. And usually I run into some guys, he'll say, but it's not that. It's the opposite.
It was a lonely work, and
very lonely work.
I think as we talk, sometimes I talk to students about sharing their faith, and they're like, "Well, I tried it one time and it didn't take, so I'm done." But this was not his story. He was a plotter, an endurer. He kept going. That's incredible.
Can I read something?
Of course.
I put a note, and I know we're not going to spend all the time in the world reading the book. Mine is very beat up. I'd love to testify, again, as we said we could, later on, maybe in a piece, to what this man's writing has meant to me personally as being a missionary. I want to give you a 5-day glimpse. So this is the only section where I've written in my notes where I'd love to read something for viewers to be able to say, what was it like in all this time? What was he seeing and doing and being a part of? This is not you go on a weekend retreat, you do something, you come back. Yeah. He's out there. And
wandered into the woods, didn't know what was going to happen.
He tells the stories of the horse getting stolen. It gets sick. It breaks a leg. I mean, everything you would imagine, it's part of his story. And it's so short, again, and he suffers so tremendously. Let me mention before I do here, in case it's not in the notes explicitly, I don't think he ever mentions it, tuberculosis is what killed him. And tuberculosis is very easily treatable today with antibiotics. Sure. It is a lung pathogen that you can expel, and if somebody's got it and it's in that contagion stage, you get it. We don't know where he contracted it, but he got it, and it leads to the kind of suffering this young man endured that we would just say, if you're suffering anything, like I get a headache, I don't want to go to church. You know, I get a back pain, and I'm like, I'm not so sure I should go to campus today and do my thing or something. What kept this young man going is what captivates so many people when they read his story.
It's painful, respiratory, coughing up blood, just hurts hard, lethargy. That's kind of the rigmarole of that disease. And right?
You ready for this?
I'm ready for it.
Wednesday, August 20. Having lain in a cold sweat all night, I'm going to resist tears because I've spent time with Brainerd trying to imagine this young man. I coughed much bloody matter this morning and was under great disorder of body and not a little melancholy. Who wants to define what that is?
Melancholy is sorrow. It's a contemplative state, depressive.
Depressed, yes. Okay, it's just an old word that we may not get. So not a little melancholy. But what gave me some encouragement was I had a secret hope that I might speedily get a dismission from earth. In all its toils and sorrows, rode this day to one chambers upon Susquehanna, that's one of the Native American tribes, and there lodged, or areas, was much afflicted in the evening with an ungodly crew. This is coughing, drinking, etc. Oh, what a hell would it be to be numbered with the ungodly. Enjoyed some agreeable conversation with a traveler who seemed to have some relish of true religion. Okay, I said I want to give you a 5-day picture.
Okay.
Thursday, August 21. Rode up the river about 15 miles, and there lodged in a family that appeared quite destitute of God. Labored to discourse with the man about the life of religion, but found him very artful in evading such conversation. Oh, what a death it is to some to hear the things of God. Was out of my element, but was not so dejected as at some times. Friday, August 22. Continued my course up the river, my people now being with me, who before were parted from me, traveled above all the English settlements, at night lodged in the open woods, and slept with more comfort than while among any ungodly company of white people. Enjoyed some liberty and secret prayer this evening. Oh, he was a prayer, okay? Like, unbelievable, lovely prayer recorded by him. And was helped to remember dear friends as well as my dear flock and the church of God in general. All right. Saturday, August 23rd, arrived at the Indian town called Shamoking near night. Was not so dejected as formerly, but yet somewhat exercised. Felt somewhat composed in the evening, enjoyed some freedom in leaving my all with God. Through the great goodness of God, I enjoyed some liberty of mind, and was not distressed with a despondency as frequently heretofore. 2 more days, a part of 2 more days. Lord's Day, August 24. Towards noon, visited some of the Delawares and discoursed with them about Christianity. In the afternoon, discoursed to the king and others upon divine things who seemed to dispose to hear. Spent most of the day in these exercises. In the evening, enjoyed some comfort and satisfaction, and especially had some sweetness in secret prayer. This duty was made so agreeable to me that I loved to walk abroad and repeatedly engage in it. Oh, how comfortable is a little glimpse of God. Last half sentence. Monday, August 25. Spent most of the day in writing. And it goes on. This is the kind of thing you read over and over.
Yeah. That's something I heard about him a lot, that he was characterized by his prayer life, that he loved to be with the Lord, and that's where he found his solace, that's where he found his encouragement, that's where he found his comfort. You've alluded to it a couple times. Tell us about that tombstone. Tell us about how his journey here on earth ended, and we'll go into some kind of application thoughts on his life.
I'm going to read the tombstone itself. So he's buried in the Bridge Street Cemetery now in Northampton, Massachusetts, right next to where 4 of Jonathan Edwards' daughters are buried. One of which, Jerusha, almost everyone believes, died a year after Brainerd at 17 by contracting tuberculosis from him.
Oh, man.
So she dies at 17 years old. Her father is Jonathan Edwards, who wrote The Life and Diary of David Brainerd.
Yeah.
And just in case anybody's like, wait, she was 17, they were going to get married. Like, this is a vastly different time. We talked about like technology, but like people got married at 15 years old.
Well, they weren't necessarily. Yeah. Were they going to get
They
married?
well, we don't have any.
Oh, did I spoil that?
Yeah. No.
Oh, okay.
It's not. It's almost everybody believes some of the things he says in his journal about this precious, unique love that he so valued, the time of.
Exactly.
She ministered to him in the last 5 months of his life.
Sure.
She was there, and he talked with Edwards' children, inquiring about their spiritual life. He wrote. He was so laborious. Again, I'll talk about that a little bit, but we don't know for sure. But almost every biographer I've ever read has said Jerusha Edwards, who was Jonathan Edwards' 17-year-old daughter, that he, being 29, coming to the end of his life, they were interested in one another.
Yeah, seems like Edwards treated him much like a son. You know, and there was a spiritual love there and all that sort of stuff. But
and enough to like edit all of his journals and publish them and distribute them.
Well, I wish we had all of Brainerd's writings. Yeah. We don't have them. We have the journal, but he was a. Let me read his tombstone. It says, quote, "Sacred to the memory of the Reverend David Brainerd, a faithful and laborious missionary to the Stockbridge, Delaware, and Susquehanna tribes of Indians who died in this town October 10, 1747. It's just a laying on the ground flat stone, nothing special about it. Next is this one of Edwards' daughters who died, some of which in old age, and then Jerusha's in there, dead at 17. But that's where he's buried. That's the memory of the man. That's it. And you would never have heard of this guy without Jonathan Edwards compiling and doing some introductory work to who he was, and putting out this book. Again, it's never been out of print.
Saying, hey, this is a story worth telling. And Jonathan Edwards believed it. And when we said, hey, we want you to talk about who you were excited to talk about this guy. And you said he was a big part of your story. Yeah. So how? Why? Why did I'll be honest, I had never heard of this guy.
Yeah.
How did his story intersect with yours? What was the kind of in a minute or two kind of why?
Oh,
why
no, we need an hour. I need an hour. Can we have an hour? Okay, a minute or two.
We'll have you back.
So I answered a call to missionary work as a Army chaplain on 15 December 2005. It was a Thursday. Somebody asked me at a certain function. I was military at the time. Have I ever thought of becoming a chaplain? I said no. Went and found one that night. He told me how to do it. It's years of work and school and endorsement, etc. I said that's what I'm going to do. Now it took 11 years to get there, but God let me get there 11 years later. And in the interim was all missionary work. My wife and I answered a call to go back on active duty, Army, and be gone. So there was specifically in that time, so I commissioned in 2007 in the Army, and I left for that training in the very end of 2006. I was gone all of 2007 for training. Came home for the birth of one daughter, my oldest, at 18, and saw her for about 2 weeks before I left for 3 more months. Got together with my wife. I was gone from December 2006, the last week of it, through November of 2007 for training. I had to go do this, I had to go here, I had to go here, little week or two between those 3 major works. And then my wife and I, with our new daughter, have to move from this area to the lovely woods of Fort Polk, Louisiana. I won't tell you that story because I've only got 2 minutes.
When you say lovely, seems like
the most genuine thing you've ever said.
If you told us your real feelings, you might offend people from that region of Louisiana.
Which a large part of our listenership is actually from Louisiana.
Any little known fact, portion of our listeners.
All of Louisiana.
Anybody in the military goes, I know what he's talking about. Yeah, move on. I got it. Because it is, if the Army had an armpit, it would be one of them. Probably the stinkiest of the 2.
Put that on a t-shirt.
Yep. Yeah. And it's a truism. So JRTC, just say those words to an Army guy and he'll go, oh yeah, I got you. But we were moving there, and then I found out I'm deploying to Iraq for maybe a year and a half.
Sure.
And we're still in temporary housing with my 3-month-old daughter, and I'm leaving them. I've been gone a year, and it's time to leave for another year or plus. And what do? You play a sermon about David Brainerd, and you cry, and you look at your daughter, and you say, my goodness, I want to be with you. I don't get to be with you. I've got to leave. This is hard. And so really what kind of hits me is, as a dad, I have 4 kids. I was there for the first 8 months, it ended up being, of my first kid. I was there for the first 8 days of my second kid. I was there for the first year of my third kid, and I met my 4th kid when he was 4 months old. So we gave and died a lot to answering and going after a call. I wasn't even a chaplain yet. That was the last 7 years of my 21 on active duty, 26 years of service. And so the suffering and the dying that a man like Brainerd did, I got to do a little bit of it.
And not to the tuberculosis, but to self.
To self.
And to say,
there are many deaths.
The call brings
Yeah.
this sacrifice, and I'm willing to give it because the call is worthy. And you in his example,
Yeah.
saw some encouragement there.
Yeah.
That really hit you.
What's going to keep me going? What kept him going? You got to be drawing near to the Lord, because it isn't going to be the Indians.
Yeah.
And it's not going to be the soldiers.
Yeah.
And so there was a little bit of dying, and my advice to so many, we don't get to do any dying as extremely wealthy Westerners in the 21st century. We just don't get to. If you can at all and give it to the Lord, what a blessing. David Brainerd's life impacted so many because of how he died, but how he lived. No doubt.
So a whole can of worms, but I feel like it has to be broached. Been doing student ministry for 15 years, a lot of public education system and stuff like this. And kind of we're talking about tuberculosis. We're talking about pioneers going to the Indians and that whole they were given disease blankets and all that sort of stuff. And so sometimes we haven't really touched on it in this podcast yet, but the whole missionary endeavor, sometimes people are like, well, why don't you just leave them alone? They're in the woods with their own lives. They're doing fine. And anthropologists, people that study human development, don't always love missionaries. But for David and for Christians and for the whole missionary enterprise, why do we say, no, we go with this message and it's worth it?
Yeah.
Even when it costs us and even if there are complicating factors. Can you speak to that a little bit? Because when you start thinking about the Americas and our immediate context and Indigenous Peoples Day, and we should be really grateful for they had their unique view of religion, and they were, why touch all that? Why voyage out into the woods?
Yeah. How will they hear without a preacher? Is that verse that comes to mind, which is that Romans 10 passage that people have to go. And the gospel is what God has chosen, the seeming foolishness of the message preached to save those who believe. So preachers, evangelism, prayer, going is we all know, right? The primary verb of Jesus' statement is make disciples.
Yeah.
As you are going in the world, do this work. Well, what about these Indian tribes? There's a lot of overlap, and there's a lot of evil, and there's a lot of fallenness, and why people do what they do. Surely even among missionaries, motives and things. Paul talks about that in his own life.
Yeah.
Some people seeking to add, things to his chains and make him miserable.
Yeah.
But he rejoiced that Christ was preached, nevertheless.
Even if they're preaching out of vanity,
Yeah.
even if they're just trying to develop a platform or get famous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because regardless of where people are from, there's actually one truth. There's actually one God. There's actually to which everyone will give an account. And so missionaries like Brainerd and everyone that embraces this endeavor says, hey, I know you've got your own ideas, but there's a real God that you're going to answer to, and you've got to know about it. So I thought that was valuable. Zach, I think you've got some good stuff to share, and you're doing a great job. I got one more question for Joan. Maybe you can jump in.
Sure.
As a father, I've met you mostly as dad. I work with your kids. You mentioned you have 4 of them, very cool kids. And I know you think a lot about that call of dad.
Yeah.
And so this man that has shaped your life, I know there's a couple that have hit me that I want to be able to pass on to my children somehow. The way that these missionaries have helped me, I want my boys to get it. If you were to think, okay, the one lesson, the one takeaway I'm hoping my children learn from Brainerd that would help them in this life.
Yeah.
What's that one through line that you're hoping to see them catch?
I mentioned it already. We get to die so little. We all know what dying produces. In fact, one of the verses, Zach, that we talked about putting up was in John 12, if we have that, what Jesus said of himself, and thus implying to the whole church, unless a grain of wheat falls into the ground and dies, it remains alone. I don't know if I'm getting ahead of you there.
Yeah, I got it up now. Sorry, it took
to
me a
pull
minute.
up. Right, but
I'm a
if
bad
it
button
dies...
pusher.
You're doing great. And
no
we already
prompting.
clapped for
Look.
Moses.
Yeah.
Everyone needs, wherever you are, stop what you're doing and clap audibly
don't do
for
that.
Pastor Zach right now.
I'll do this, or maybe this.
Yeah,
this
snap
is the
for
thing.
You said John 12?
John 12.
Yeah, I got up there now.
And
Sorry.
24, right?
Yep.
Verse. And so Brainerd, and if you read the story of missionaries, this book from Danny Aiken, again, 10 who changed the world.
Yeah.
Brainerd's one of those 10. They gave, and they gave with so little. And so my message to my children I want them to get is you lose nothing if it is given to the Lord. And I don't know, you don't hear that on the beach when you're on vacation putting sunscreen on. You don't get it then.
And if it's in that verse, I hear this principle like, if you want your life not to count, if you want it to be wasted, if you want it to be fruitless, keep it to yourself.
Yeah.
Refuse to die. Refuse
There
to
it is.
sacrifice. But if you want fruit, you must give, you must die, you must give the yes.
And it may not be Brainerd. Let's thank God it's not Brainerd and tuberculosis and 29, and we're all there. But what deaths are you dying that Jesus says is what produces life itself? Yeah. Again, putting to death the deeds of the flesh. Those kind of talks in Scripture are everywhere. Yeah. What deaths are we dying?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I was thinking about this quote from C.T. Studd, who we'll get to eventually as well. But he said, "If Jesus Christ be God and died for me, then no sacrifice can be too great for me to make for him." Which is kind of like, I think it's 2 Corinthians 5, where he says, "We've concluded this, that all have died. Therefore, he died for all. Therefore, all of us have died, and he died for those that goodness gracious, I'm going to butcher it. It's a tongue twister, but he died that those who live might no longer live for themselves, but for him who for their sake died and was raised." Yeah. And you're saying, like, when we get what Jesus did for us on the cross, there's no like thank you note that is enough to call it square. It's like my whole life has to be lived as a sacrifice. And you said we don't get to die very often. I think that's deep. So it's like, it's not to say like we need to be ascetic monks to like go seek out discomfort just for the sake of discomfort. But I do think we need to develop a pattern of saying, like, I am going to sometimes choose things that are difficult if they're right, and get comfortable being uncomfortable sometimes.
Yeah. Well, it's life that in Christ that produces this desire of dying. Yeah. You know, it's not dying for the sake of dying. It's dying for the sake of living, bringing life.
So there's a tension I sense in the 1700s I didn't know was there, but it seems super familiar. So it kind of going back to, I quoted, he has no more grace than a chair, because I thought it was funny, because that's my level of maturity. You and your increased wisdom, you had a sobriety, you're like, well, I don't really know the guy, I'm not really sure what happened. But there's this tension that I think sometimes we feel with young, youthful exuberance and the more established status quo. And Spencer and I were just talking about kind of this moment of the Great Awakening and the young fervor. And you were speaking to a young audience today. How do you navigate that tension well? You know, even how did Barnard come to reflect? You said even that kind of side comment that probably got blown out of proportion, but he came back to recant of it, or just apologize for it. How do you navigate that tension? Because sometimes as a young person, you see something and you're like, yeah, there's really something missing here. We got to go. Yeah. But sometimes in our youthful exuberance, we might miss.
You're passionate about it. Yeah.
So what do you say to the young bucks that are listening and they're like, I'm ready to set the world on fire, new revival, let's go. I'm going to start it. I'm going to go tell all the old fogies everything that they're doing wrong. Yeah. How do you get that youthful passion pushing in the right direction so that we don't have to push against you, you know?
Some of the greatest things Jesus said are done in prayer are done in a private closet. Go into your closet, shut the door, your Father who sees in secret, right? This stealing away of prayer that was a part of our Lord's life. He is God incarnate, and he is often off praying. Yeah. And it's said in the Gospels, he's often just out praying, right? How much more do we need to pray like a Brainerd, and to whatever God has called us to, you know, 1 talent, 2 talent, 5 talent, wherever you are. I would say to the person, you worry about, and this is a quote of John MacArthur to pastors, but he said, you worry about the depth of your ministry, let God worry about the breadth of it. And so pursue the Lord where you are. Don't worry about who's seeing it. Be next to him like a Brainerd could, maybe a little easier by physical constraint. If you're in a hut with a candle and some, you know, a small fire and you're there alone for 2 years in your life, we have to talk about the suffering again and again. You are hacking up blood. I didn't read it, but to such a degree where he has got this sort of violent hiccup that is so painful in his chest that he just despairs of life. But what keeps him going? He's close to the Lord. And the kind of questions we ask is, why didn't the Lord heal him? Why didn't he give him another 20 years? I don't want to, you know, in the part of the takeaways, my question is, I think that's something we're all led to ask, like, why the suffering? Think of the Apostle Paul. And one of the verses, Zach, if you don't mind pulling it up there, that I had sent was Acts 9 in verses 15 to 16. So in the calling of the Apostle Saul, we call him Paul by his Greek name, he is, in his conversion, another brother named Ananias is sent to him to lay hands on him, to baptize him in water, to all these things. And Jesus says to Ananias, on Ananias' resistance to go to Paul, go, for he's a chosen instrument of mine to bear my name before the Gentiles and kings and the sons of Israel, for I will show him how much he must suffer for my name's sake. And Aiken writes about this too in his book. Why was Paul in prison?
Yeah.
It isn't that he messed up and somehow he's suffering. Would he have bore before Festus, before Agrippa, moving to Caesar's house, appealing to the law? Would he have borne witness to the gospel without the arrest?
Yeah.
So all the suffering Paul goes through is tremendous, but it's the reason he's in prison.
Yeah. We talked about Bonhoeffer, and last episode, if you haven't checked it out yet, I'd encourage you to go listen to it.
Oh, my goodness.
So
we didn't have Joseph on when we talked about Bonhoeffer, and he's been to the place where Bonhoeffer was executed.
You got to see it in Flossenburg,
biggest
Germany.
miss.
He's lived some life. We gotta get more of Joe's
Biggest
caliber
miss.
of men, that level of wisdom and life experience on more often.
I'm available.
But
you let me know.
Something that I love from Bonhoeffer's quote, I think it's from The Cost of Discipleship, is the way that he talks about it. To follow Jesus is a call to come and die. And I think so much of the way that we sometimes present the gospel is like, it's great, it's your best life now, it's going to be wonderful, he's going to fix your problems in your car, in your girlfriend. But he's like, Jesus said, if anyone desires to live godly in Christ Jesus, he will suffer.
Yeah.
He'll suffer persecution, and there's a cost and a pain in that. And that's, I'm kind of a happy-go-lucky person. I'm pretty caloric and all those sorts of things. And,
yep, you are.
I like being positive, but I love that in this podcast we've chosen to highlight some stories and say, hey, you give God your yes, and he glorifies himself radically in your life. That might not look like stadiums chanting Jesus' name or your name. It might be a bit more obscure, and it might be in the throne room of heaven when people are rejoicing over your work, over your faithfulness. It might be the cloud of witnesses that's cheering you home, and no one on earth knows what you're sacrificing to be with him. But
that's right.
But Jesus is worth it.
That's right. And that is back to that talent idea. The man who was given 5 and makes so many, the person who was given 1 and makes 2, or 2 and makes 4, pick your quantity. There's no less glory for the one given the 1 talent that makes 2 than the one given 5 that makes 10.
Yeah.
It's from the same hand of the same Lord that he's judged and his work with it. And so, drawing near to the Lord, have a ministry. Pray for people. It does not have to be the extravagant works that we would love to see doing, and God calls some people to do. Do what your hand sees fit to do unto the Lord. Yeah. To end with a very profound quote, perhaps, there was a talking turtle in a children's cartoon my son watched, and he was like, maybe someday I'll go to Zanzibar, and it was maybe later, but right now, just start where you are. Yeah. Wherever God has you, to start saying, that's the place God's placed you. Do the work of the Lord there. Glorify him. As we kind of start to land the plane, wrap up, Zach, Joe, do you guys have any final thoughts for our listeners and things? Hey, don't forget this. This is one thing I'm taking from it.
No, I think everybody should go on a mission trip of some sort. They should have some sort of cross-cultural interaction to share the gospel. For Brainerd, that was sharing the gospel with people who were in the same vicinity, but vastly different cultures, of course, different language. I think that is so helpful. And we've said to people, if you're in high school, if you go across the ocean to share the gospel, somehow it's a lot easier to come back home and then go across the street and share the gospel. Like when we take students to Budapest and Bucharest this summer, and they're going to get rejected a lot. And that's kind of part of the design. There will be some people who accept Jesus, praise the Lord, but it's like getting okay being told no and realizing it's not the end of the world to be told no. So helpful. So I would just say, you might be like, I don't know that I need to go share the gospel with Native Americans. There aren't any near me. That's okay. You can go find somebody who is maybe farther away from a different culture. But also, we're in Tampa. There's how many different nationalities and ethnicities here? You don't have to go that far.
Who's near you that's far from Jesus?
Yeah.
Joe, you got a final shot?
He had some sweetness in his ministry. Again, he talks about how he knew of no assembly of Christians. Danny Aiken highlights this. Where there was so much brotherly love prevailing. And just 9 months ago, they were worshiping devils and dumb idols under the power of pagan darkness and superstition. I mean, the guys
That's
talk.
Not politically. He said dumb idols.
Yeah.
But they are.
They don't talk, They're just, but they're there. And so, again, he had about 130 converts that he would say in his life that were such a blessing. And what God did, we will never know. Jim Elliot was one of the many missionaries, very famous, that credited Brainerd's life. Again, spend time with this book, The Life and Diary of David Brainerd. Get this, read it, have it on your shelf. It's one of the top 10 books I'd recommend anybody read that is wanting to know more about Christ.
And this guy would never say it, but he's read a lot of books. So that's a big
recommendation. This is one of 5 that I've read, and so it's definitely a high recommendation. Jim Elliot, I got to get this quote in. We've heard it before. He is no fool who gives what he cannot keep to gain what he cannot lose. Brainerd gave and will have a better resurrection than me in his giving and what he did. I envy him for that. I don't envy his suffering. And nobody would ask for that. But I heard a testimony of a man yesterday who won't be here in 18 months due to pancreatic cancer. He said, I never would have wished for this, but I also would never wish to go back to my prayer life before I knew I had it. Mm-hmm. And I don't know what to do with that. I'm not going to ask for cancer. I'm not asking for it.
Sure.
But that man understands something in his dying and in his giving that a guy like me that's going, all right, I got 40 years. Let me sleep in tomorrow, maybe. And thank God we can plan and hope for the future. But I just want to leave that with folks is give what you've got to the Lord. You can't lose it.
What a good segue and a great tease, because we're going to cover Jim Elliot real soon.
Coming up. It's one of my favorites. Hey, David Brainerd, a life well lived, a man that's marked the path for us beforehand. And when we follow in his footsteps, to say yes to God, to run where it's hard, and understand that might mean sacrifice, that might mean pain, but he is infinitely worth it. Today, wherever God has placed you, may you run. Today, may you glorify God and know as you count the cost, he is infinitely worth it. We're going to be looking soon at another ordinary legend. Go ahead and share this with someone that you think it'll be a blessing to, and join us next time as we continue to figure out how can we mark our lives with the same level of faithfulness that took these ordinary people and made them legends in the faith.